The stagecoach rattled into Rock Springs, Wyoming on a blistering August afternoon in 1876, and Thea Kingsley gripped the leather strap with hands that could crush iron, her palms bearing the thick calluses of 15 years spent working the docks of Boston Harbor alongside men twice her size. She had answered the advertisement for a mail-order bride out of desperation, not romance. Her father had died 2 winters past, crushed beneath falling timber at the shipyard, and her mother followed him 6 months later from the fever that swept through the poorhouses. Thea had managed alone, hauling crates and mending nets, her fingers bleeding and her back aching, but the foreman had finally told her the truth she had been dreading. No woman would keep a job meant for a man, not when there were hungry families needing the work. The advertisement had been simple. Rancher seeking capable wife. Must be strong, willing to work, no delicate sensibilities. Write to Zachary Hollister, Rock Springs, Wyoming territory. She had written back with brutal honesty, describing her scarred hands and broad shoulders, her complete ignorance of cooking anything fancier than fish stew, her ability to lift a 100-pound sack of grain without assistance. She expected no reply. Instead, she received a ticket west and a brief note. "You sound exactly right." Now, stepping down from the stagecoach into the dusty Main Street, Thea searched the handful of waiting faces for someone who might be her intended. The town was smaller than she had imagined, a collection of weathered buildings scattered along the railroad tracks, with the wild sweep of Wyoming stretching endlessly in every direction. The mountains rose in the distance like broken teeth, and the wind carried the scent of sagebrush and something she could not name. "Miss Kingsley." She turned toward the voice and found herself looking up at a man who stood well over 6 feet, with shoulders that strained the seams of his work shirt. His face was weathered bronze from years under the sun, with lines etched deep around pale blue eyes that studied her with an intensity that made her breath catch. He was perhaps 28 or 30, she guessed, with dark hair that needed cutting and hands that rested casually on his belt, scarred and capable. "Zachary Hollister," he said, extending one of those hands. Thea took it, her grip firm and sure. His eyebrows rose slightly as their palms met, and then something shifted in his expression, a tension releasing that she had not realized he carried. "You were not exaggerating," he said, and there was approval in his voice that sent unexpected warmth through her chest. "Neither were you," she replied, tilting her head back to meet his eyes. "You said you needed someone capable." "I need someone who will not break," he corrected, releasing her hand slowly. "The ranch is 20 miles from town, and we run cattle through country that does not forgive weakness." "My last hired hand quit after 2 months, said the isolation was driving him mad. I cannot afford to bring you out there just to have you beg for passage back east within a week." Thea straightened her spine, which brought her to just shy of his shoulder. She was tall for a woman, 5 feet 8 inches, and she had learned long ago not to apologize for it. "I have worked Boston Harbor for 15 years, Mr. Hollister. I have gutted fish in winter storms and hauled cargo in heat that made men twice my size collapse. I do not break easily." Something flickered across his face, an emotion she could not quite read. He reached past her to collect her trunk from the stage-coach driver, lifting it as though it weighed nothing, and she noticed the play of muscles beneath his shirt, the easy strength of someone who worked hard every day of his life. "We will see," he said, but there was no challenge in it, only statement of fact. "The wagon is this way." She followed him down the street to where a sturdy wagon waited, hitched to 2 patient horses. As he loaded her trunk, she studied him more carefully. He moved with the efficient grace of someone who wasted no motion, every gesture purposeful. His hands, when they released the trunk, bore calluses as thick as her own, and she noticed old rope burns across his palms, scars that told stories of breaking wild horses and wrestling cattle. "Have you eaten?" he asked, turning back to her. "Not since dawn." He nodded toward a building with a painted sign reading Mary's Dining Hall. "We should get food before we head out. It is a 3-hour drive to the ranch and the trail is rough." The dining hall was half full with men in dusty work clothes, and every head turned when Thea walked in. She was accustomed to the stares, the way men looked at a woman who stood too tall and moved too confidently. She had learned to ignore it. But Zachary placed a hand on the small of her back, guiding her to a corner table, and the gesture was both protective and possessive enough that the stares quickly returned to plates and conversations. "They do not see many new faces here," he explained, pulling out a chair for her. "Especially not women traveling alone." "I imagine not." Thea settled into the chair, grateful to be off her feet after 2 days on the stagecoach. "How long have you been in Rock Springs?" "5 years. I came out from Missouri after the war, looking for land where a man could build something that mattered." He signaled to the woman behind the counter, who nodded and disappeared into the kitchen. "Bought 800 acres north of here in the foothills. Good grazing land, plenty of water. I have been running cattle, building the herd. Alone, mostly. I had a partner the first year, but he sold me his share and went to California looking for gold." Zachary leaned back in his chair, studying her with those unsettling blue eyes. "I hired men when I could afford them, but good help is scarce out here. Most cowboys want to work the big ranches down south, where there is more action. My spread is too isolated, too much work for the pay I can offer." "So you decided on a wife instead?" "I decided I needed a partner," he corrected. "Someone with as much stake in the ranch's success as I have. Someone who would not leave when the work got hard." The woman from the counter arrived with 2 plates of beef stew and thick slices of bread, setting them down with a curious glance at Thea. "New in town?" she asked, her voice friendly. "Newly arrived," Thea confirmed. "Thea Kingsley, Mary Patterson. I run this place." She wiped her hands on her apron, her eyes sharp but kind. "You planning to stay?" "That is the intention." Mary glanced at Zachary, and something passed between them, some wordless communication that Thea could not interpret. Then Mary smiled, the expression genuine. "Well, welcome to Rock Springs. If you need anything, you know where to find me." As she walked away, Thea picked up her spoon, suddenly aware of how hungry she was. The stew was simple but good, rich with meat and vegetables, and she ate without pretense, too practical to worry about appearing delicate. Zachary ate with the same straightforward efficiency, but she caught him watching her between bites, his expression thoughtful. Finally, he set down his spoon and leaned forward. "I want to be honest with you," he said. "The ranch is not easy living. The house is sound, but it is small. 1 room for sleeping, 1 for living, a kitchen. I built it myself, so it is sturdy, but it is not fancy. We are 20 miles from town, which means we make the trip maybe once a month for supplies. In winter, sometimes less. The work is dawn to dusk, 7 days a week. Cattle do not take holidays." Thea met his gaze steadily. "What do you need from a wife, honestly?" He ran a hand through his hair, and she noticed how it fell back into place, thick and dark. "I need someone who can handle a horse, mend fence, help with calving season. I need someone who can shoot if wolves come after the herd, who can keep the house running while I am out on the range. I need a partner, not a decoration. And in return, you will have a home, security, a share in everything we build. I am not a wealthy man, Thea, but I am a hard worker and the ranch has potential. In 5 years, maybe 10, we could have something real, something that lasts." She considered this, turning it over in her mind. It was more honesty than she had expected, more respect than most men offered. What about the marriage itself? Color touched his cheekbones, barely visible beneath the tan. I will not force anything on you that you do not want. We can take time, figure out how we work together. If it turns out we are not suited, I will pay your passage to wherever you want to go, no questions asked. That is generous. It is fair. He picked up his spoon again, but his eyes remained on hers. I have been alone a long time, Thea. I know what I am asking is not conventional, but I saw your letter, read about your work on the docks, and I thought, here is someone who understands what it takes to survive. Someone who would not expect me to be something I am not. Something in her chest tightened at those words, a recognition she had not anticipated. She had spent so many years being told she was too much, too strong, too unwomanly. And here was a man actively seeking those very qualities. I can learn to cook, she said quietly. I am not hopeless in a kitchen, just inexperienced with anything fancy. I am not fancy. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, transforming his serious face. I can teach you about cattle and horses. You can teach me whatever you know. We will figure it out together. They finished their meal in companionable silence, and Thea felt some of the tension drain from her shoulders. This was not the future she had imagined as a girl, but perhaps it was better, more honest, more real. Outside, Zachary helped her up onto the wagon seat, his hand steady on her waist, and she noticed how carefully he released her, as though afraid of presuming too much. The horses moved forward at his quiet command, and Rock Springs fell away behind them as they headed north into open country. The land was unlike anything Thea had ever seen. Massachusetts had been all close horizons and crowded streets, the ocean a constant presence. Here, the world stretched endlessly, the sky so vast it made her dizzy. The grass rippled in waves before the wind, golden and green, and scattered cattle dotted the hills like fallen boulders. That is the edge of my land, Zachary said, pointing to a line of fence posts marching across a distant ridge. 800 acres from there to the mountains. Not huge by Wyoming standards, but enough to support a good herd if we manage it right. How many cattle do you have? About 200 head right now. I am hoping to build that to 400 or 500 over the next few years. The railroad pays decent prices for beef, and the market is growing. They talked as the wagon rolled onward, Zachary explaining the rhythms of ranch life, the seasonal movements of the herd, the constant battle against weather and predators, and simple bad luck. Thea listened carefully, filing away information, asking questions when she did not understand. He answered each one thoughtfully, never talking down to her, treating her questions as intelligent rather than naive. The sun was lowering toward the mountains when they finally crested a rise, and she saw the ranch spread out below. The house was exactly as he had described it. Small, sturdy, built from rough-hewn logs with a stone chimney rising from one end. A barn stood nearby, along with a couple of smaller outbuildings, and a creek ran silver through the valley bottom, lined with cottonwoods that glowed golden in the fading light. It is not much, Zachary said, and she heard uncertainty in his voice for the first time. It is beautiful, Thea replied, and meant it. There was something honest about the place, something real and permanent that called to a part of her she had not known existed. He glanced at her, surprise flickering across his face, and then that small smile returned. Come on. I will show you inside. The house was clean, she noticed immediately, and well organized. The main room held a table, a couple of chairs, shelves lined with books and supplies. The kitchen area was simple but functional, with a good stove and a pump that brought water directly inside, a luxury she had not expected. Through a doorway, she glimpsed a bedroom with a large bed covered in quilts. "I will sleep in the barn tonight," Zachary said quickly. "Until we figure out arrangements. You do not have to do that, I know." He set her trunk down carefully, "But I meant what I said, no pressure. We take this at whatever pace makes sense." Thea turned to face him fully, this man who was technically her husband by law, though they had not yet spoken any vows beyond what the advertisement implied. He met her gaze steadily, and she saw the same careful respect there that had been in every action since he met her at the stagecoach. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for being honest, for treating me like a person instead of property." "You are not property, Thea. You are a partner, or at least I hope you will be." He moved toward the door, then paused. "I will be up at dawn to check the herd. If you want to come along, see how things work, you are welcome. Otherwise, make yourself at home. Everything here is yours as much as mine." After he left, Thea stood in the quiet house, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the Wyoming night settling in around her. Somewhere an owl called, and the wind whispered through the cottonwoods. She walked to the window and looked out at the barn, where lamplight showed through the cracks, and felt something shift inside her. This place, this man, this life, it was all so different from everything she had known. But for the first time since her father died, she felt the possibility of something beyond mere survival. She felt the possibility of building something that mattered. She unpacked her few belongings, finding space for her clothes and setting her mother's photograph on the shelf. The bed was comfortable when she finally lay down, the quilts smelling of sage and sunshine. And as she drifted towards sleep, she thought about Zachary's hands, scarred and capable like her own, and wondered what it might be like to truly be partners with someone who saw strength as something to value rather than apologize for. Dawn came early, light flooding through the windows and pulling Thea from dreams she could not quite remember. She dressed quickly in her most practical clothes, a simple dress that allowed freedom of movement, and went to the kitchen to investigate. Coffee supplies sat obvious on the shelf, and she had the stove going and water heating when she heard boots on the porch. Zachary knocked before entering his own house, and that small courtesy made her smile. "Morning," he said, and she noticed his hair was damp, like he had washed at the creek. "You did not have to get up so early. I want to learn," she replied, "and I am accustomed to dawn starts. The docks did not wait for anyone to feel rested." He poured himself coffee, then refilled her cup without asking, the gesture automatic. "I thought I would check the north pasture today. A few of the cattle were looking to calve soon, and I want to make sure they are all right. It is about a 2-hour ride. I can ride." She said it with more confidence than she felt. She had ridden a few times in Boston, delivery horses mostly, but never for distance. His eyes assessed her not unkindly. "Have you ridden much, enough to stay on?" She met his gaze. "But I would appreciate instruction if my technique needs work." "Fair enough." He drained his coffee and set the cup aside. "Come on, I will introduce you to Sage. She is patient with new riders." The morning was cool and clear, the sky that endless blue she was learning to associate with Wyoming. In the barn, Zachary showed her how to approach the horses, how to saddle them properly, checking each strap and buckle with care. The mare he chose for her was a calm gray with intelligent eyes, and Thea took her time getting acquainted, letting the horse learn her scent and touch. "You have good instincts," Zachary observed, working on his own horse a few stalls over. "A lot of people rush it, try to force the horse to accept them, but they are like people, they need time to decide if they trust you." "My father taught me that," Thea said, stroking Sage's neck. "He worked with draft horses at the shipyard. He said an animal could sense your intentions, good or bad, and they would not forgive you for lying to them." "Smart man." "He was." She swung up into the saddle, adjusting her seat, grateful that the dress she had chosen was full enough to allow her to ride astride without immodesty. He would have liked this place, I think. He always said he wanted to see the West before he died. Zachary mounted his own horse, a tall bay gelding, and moved alongside her. I am sorry you lost him. So am I. They rode out together into the growing light, and Thea focused on the rhythm of the horse beneath her, the feel of the reins in her hands. Zachary watched without commenting, letting her find her own balance, only offering suggestions when she struggled. His teaching style was patient, clear, and she found herself relaxing into the motion, starting to understand the partnership between horse and rider. The land unfolded around them in rolling waves, the grass still green from summer rains. They passed scattered cattle, which raised their heads to watch with mild curiosity before returning to grazing. Zachary pointed out landmarks, teaching her how to read the land where the water sources were, how to spot sick or injured animals in a herd. There, he said, pulling up on a rise. Below them, a cow stood near a cottonwood, and even from a distance, Thea could see something was wrong with the way she held herself. She is in trouble. They rode down carefully, and as they got closer, Thea saw the problem. The cow was trying to calve, but something had gone wrong. The calf was positioned badly, one leg folded back, and the mother was exhausted from trying. Zachary was off his horse in an instant, approaching the cow with calm authority. "Easy, Mama, we are going to help you." He glanced back at Thea. "Can you hold her head? Keep her calm." Thea dismounted and went to the cow's head, kneeling in the grass and stroking the animal's face, murmuring soft words. The cow's eyes were rolling with pain and fear, but she seemed to respond to Thea's touch, some of the panic easing. "That is good," Zachary said, his voice low and focused. He had rolled up his sleeves and was carefully reaching inside the cow, his face tight with concentration. "Keep her steady. This is going to hurt, but if we cannot get the calf turned, we will lose them both." Thea kept her hands on the cow's head, her voice steady even as her heart pounded. She had seen difficult births at the docks, when the working dogs had puppies, but never anything this large, this critical. Zachary worked with methodical care, his hands sure despite the difficulty, and finally she heard him make a satisfied sound. "Got it. The leg is straight now." "Come on, Mama, you can do this." The cow strained, bellowing with effort, and then suddenly the calf was coming, sliding out in a rush of fluid. Zachary caught it, clearing its mouth and nose, rubbing it briskly with handfuls of grass. For a long moment, nothing happened, and Thea felt her breath catch in her throat. Then the calf gasped, shuddered, and let out a weak cry. "There you go," Zachary murmured, still rubbing. "Welcome to Wyoming, little one." The mother cow struggled to her feet, exhaustion forgotten, and began licking her newborn with fierce tenderness. Thea stood slowly, her knees damp from the grass, and watched as the calf tried to stand on wobbly legs. "Will they be all right?" she asked. "They will now." Zachary straightened, his shirt covered in blood and birth fluids, his face relaxed with relief. "That was close. Another hour and we would have lost them both." He looked at her, and something warm entered his eyes. "You did well. A lot of people would have panicked." "I have seen worse on the docks," she said, but she felt pleased by his approval. "Though I admit, I have never helped deliver a calf before." "Well, you have now." He walked to the creek and washed his hands and arms, the water running pink. "There will be more before calving season is done. We have about 40 cows due in the next few weeks." They stayed long enough to make sure the calf could nurse, then rode on to check the rest of the herd. The morning stretched into afternoon, and Thea learned the reality of ranch work. The constant movement, the careful observation, the way Zachary knew each animal by sight and could tell at a glance if something was wrong. It was exhausting work, but there was a satisfaction to it she had not expected. By the time they rode back to the ranch, the sun was lowering and Thea's legs ached from hours in the saddle. But when Zachary asked if she was all right, she nodded firmly. "I am fine. Tired, but fine." "You will be sore tomorrow," he warned, dismounting and reaching up to help her down. His hands spanned her waist easily, and he lowered her carefully to the ground. For a moment they stood close, and she was aware of the heat of his body, the clean scent of him beneath the smell of horses and grass. Then he stepped back, releasing her. "But you did really well today, better than most hired hands on their first ride." "I am motivated to learn," she replied. "This is my home now, too." Something flickered in his expression, an emotion too quick to name. "Come on. I will show you how to care for the horses, and then we should probably think about food." That evening, Thea attempted her first real meal in the ranch kitchen. Zachary had brought in fresh eggs from the chickens she had not yet met, and there was bacon and bread, simple ingredients that even she could manage. She cooked while he cleaned up from the day's work, and when they sat down to eat, the food was plain but edible. "This is good," Zachary said, and she could tell he meant it. "It is basic," she corrected, "but I will learn to do better." "Basic is fine with me." He reached for more bacon. "I have been eating my own cooking for 5 years. Trust me, this is an improvement." They talked through the meal, comparing notes on the day, and Thea found herself relaxing into the conversation. Zachary had a quiet sense of humor that emerged when he was comfortable, a dry wit that caught her off guard and made her laugh. And when he laughed in return, his whole face changed, becoming younger, more open. After dinner, he showed her around the rest of the ranch in the fading light. The chickens, 2 dozen of them, roosting in a secure coop. The root cellar, stocked with preserved foods against the winter. The workshop where he repaired tools and tack. Everything was well maintained, organized, the work of someone who took pride in what he built. "You have done all this yourself?" she asked, running her hand along a fence rail he had clearly replaced recently. "Most of it. Had help raising the barn, but the rest, yeah. It has taken 5 years to get even this far." He leaned against the fence, looking out over his land in the twilight. "Some days I wonder if I am crazy trying to make this work alone." "You are not alone now," Thea said quietly. He turned to look at her, and in the dim light his eyes were dark and intent. "No," he agreed. "I am not." That night, he insisted again on sleeping in the barn, and Thea did not argue, though she was starting to think his continued absence from his own bed was unnecessary. But she appreciated his caution, his determination to let her set the pace. It spoke to a kind of integrity that was rare in her experience. The days fell into a rhythm after that. Each morning they rose with the sun, worked through the day on whatever the ranch demanded, and spent the evenings tending to the animals and the endless small tasks that kept a homestead running. Thea learned to milk the cow, to collect eggs without startling the chickens, to mend harness and fence with her strong hands proving invaluable. Zachary taught her to shoot, setting up targets by the creek and showing her how to hold the rifle, how to breathe and squeeze rather than pull. Her first shots went wild, but she had always been a quick study, and within a week she could hit what she aimed at more often than not. "You are built for this," he said one afternoon, watching her reload with swift efficiency. They had been riding fence line, checking for breaks, and he had handed her the rifle when they spotted coyotes in the distance. She had not hit them, but her shots had been close enough to send them running. "I mean it, Thea. You take to this life like you were born to it." She lowered the rifle, looking at him. His face was serious, no flattery in his expression, just honest assessment. "I like the work," she admitted. "I like feeling useful, like I am building something instead of just surviving." "We are building something," he said, "together." The word hung between them, weighted with meaning, and Thea felt her heart beat faster. Over the past 2 weeks, she had come to know this man in ways she had never known anyone. She had seen him exhausted and elated, frustrated and satisfied. She had watched him gentle a spooked horse and wrestle a stubborn steer. She had learned that he was unfailingly fair, that he never asked her to do anything he would not do himself, that he valued competence and honesty above all else, and she had started to notice other things. The way his hands moved, sure and careful, the rare smile that transformed his serious face, the sound of his voice in the morning, rough with sleep, the way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she was not paying attention with something that might have been longing. "Zachary," she said, and his name felt strange and right on her tongue. "You do not have to keep sleeping in the barn." He went very still. "Thea, I know what you said about taking time and I appreciate it, but we are married, legally if not yet by ceremony, and I trust you." She met his eyes directly. "I am not afraid of you. I do not want you to feel pressured. I do not." She stepped closer and saw his throat work as he swallowed. "I want a real marriage, Zachary, a real partnership, and that means sharing more than just the work." For a long moment he did not move, and she wondered if she had misread everything, if his consideration had been disinterest rather than respect. Then he reached out slowly and cupped her face in his rough palm, his thumb brushing her cheekbone with unexpected tenderness. "Are you sure?" His voice was low, careful. "I am sure." He kissed her then, soft and questioning at first, giving her every chance to pull away. But Thea leaned into him instead, her hands coming up to grip his shoulders, and felt him make a low sound of pleasure. His other arm came around her waist, pulling her against him, and the kiss deepened, becoming something urgent and real. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Zachary rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that for days," he admitted. "Since the first moment I saw you step off that stagecoach, looking like you could take on the whole territory and win." "I have wanted it too," she confessed, "though I was not sure you saw me as anything but a capable ranch hand." "Oh, I see you as much more than that." His hand slid into her hair, tilting her head back so he could look into her eyes. "You are the most extraordinary woman I have ever met, Thea Kingsley. Strong and smart and so damned beautiful it makes my chest ache." "I am not beautiful," she protested, but he silenced her with another kiss. "You are to me," he said against her mouth. "Every inch of you." That night he came back to the house, back to his own bed, and Thea learned what it meant to be wanted not despite her strength but because of it. Zachary touched her calloused hands with reverence, traced the muscles of her arms with appreciation. And when they finally came together, it was as equals. Two people who understood work and perseverance, finding softness and passion in each other. Afterward, lying in the darkness with his arm around her and her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, Thea felt something settle into place inside her. This was what she had been searching for without knowing it. Not just a home or a job, but a place where she belonged completely. "I love you," Zachary said quietly into the darkness. "I know it is fast, but I do. I think I started falling the moment I read your letter." "I love you too," she replied, and felt his arms tighten around her. "I did not expect it. I thought this would be a practical arrangement, a marriage of convenience, but it is so much more than that." "It is everything," he agreed and kissed the top of her head. "You are everything." September brought the first hints of autumn, the cottonwoods beginning to turn gold and the nights growing crisp. The cattle were thriving, the late calves all healthy, and Zachary started talking about expanding the herd next spring. He valued Thea's opinion on everything, discussing plans over dinner, asking her thoughts on which pastures to use and when to take cattle to market. They rode into Rock Springs together one Saturday for supplies, and Mary Patterson took one look at them and grinned. "Well, you two seem to have worked things out," she said, her eyes twinkling. Thea felt herself blush, but Zachary just laughed and pulled her against his side. "We have," he agreed. "Thea is the best thing that ever happened to me." "I could have told you that," Mary said. "I took one look at her and thought, there is a woman who knows her own mind. You did well, Zach." They loaded supplies and had lunch at Mary's place, and Thea found herself enjoying the brief return to civilization. But she was ready to go home when the time came, eager to return to the quiet and the work and the life they were building together. On the ride back, Zachary was quieter than usual, and when they were about halfway home, he pulled the wagon to a stop and turned to face her. "I want to do this properly," he said. "We got married by mail and contract, but I want you to have a real wedding if you want one. A ceremony, a celebration, something that means more than just paperwork." Thea looked at him, this man who had become her whole world in just a few short weeks. "I do not need a fancy ceremony," she said. "I have everything I want right here, but I want to give it to you anyway." He took her hand, running his thumb over her calluses, his touch gentle. "You deserve to be celebrated, Thea. You deserve to have people witness what we are promising each other." She felt tears prick her eyes, unexpected and sharp. "Then yes," she whispered. "I would like that." They arranged it for October, giving Mary time to help organize and spread the word through Rock Springs. Thea sewed herself a new dress, simple but well made, from fabric Zachary bought on their next trip to town. She chose deep blue, the color of the Wyoming sky, and when she tried it on for the first time, Zachary looked at her like she had hung the moon. The ceremony was held at the ranch, on a perfect October afternoon when the cottonwoods blazed gold and the sky stretched clear and endless overhead. The circuit preacher came, along with Mary and a dozen other people from Rock Springs, neighbors Thea had not yet met. Someone brought a fiddle, and someone else brought whiskey, and they spoke their vows under the big sky with the mountains watching. "I promise to be your partner in all things," Zachary said, his voice steady and his eyes locked on hers. "To work beside you, to build with you, to value your strength as much as your softness. I promise to see you, all of you, for the rest of my life." "I promise to give you my strength and my truth," Thea replied, her hands gripping his. "To build this life with you, to face whatever comes together. I promise to trust you with all that I am." When the preacher pronounced them married, Zachary kissed her thoroughly, and the gathered crowd cheered. They celebrated into the evening, music and laughter echoing across the valley, and Thea danced with her husband under the stars, his arms strong around her and his eyes full of love. Winter came hard that year, snow falling in thick blankets and temperatures dropping until the creek froze solid. But the house was warm and well stocked, and Thea and Zachary worked together to keep the cattle fed and safe. She learned to navigate the snow on horseback, to break ice so the animals could drink, to read the weather in the way the wind shifted and the clouds built over the mountains. On the coldest nights, they stayed inside, playing cards by the fire and reading from Zachary's collection of books. He taught her chess, and she proved a quick student, beating him regularly within a month. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing stories from their pasts, dreaming about the future. "I want children," Zachary said one night, his hand resting on her stomach. "If you do, I want to fill this ranch with family." "I want that too," Thea replied, covering his hand with hers. "I want to give them the life I lost when my parents died, stability, love, a place that is truly home." "They will have all of that," he promised. "And they will have you, which means they will learn what real strength looks like." Spring came late but glorious. the snow melting to reveal new grass and wildflowers. The cattle were lean but healthy, having survived the winter well, and Zachary made good on his plan to expand the herd, buying another 100 head at prices that made Thea wince, but that he assured her would pay off. She proved him right when she suggested they focus on breeding quality rather than quantity, selecting the best cows and bringing in a superior bull from a ranch in Colorado. The investment was steep, but the calves that came the following year were strong and healthy, fetching premium prices when they sold them. "You have a head for this business," Zachary told her, looking at their accounts with satisfaction. "We made more this year than I did in the previous 3 combined." "We make a good team," she corrected, leaning against his shoulder, "the best team." In the summer of 1878, Thea realized she was pregnant. She had been feeling strange for weeks, tired and queasy in the mornings, but it was Mary who finally pointed out the obvious during a visit to town. "You are glowing, honey," the older woman said, studying her face. "And unless I miss my guess, you are going to need to let out that dress soon." Thea stared at her, then felt a smile spread across her face. "I think you might be right," she told Zachary that evening, watching his face carefully as she said the words. For a moment he just stood there, frozen, and then he whooped and swept her off her feet, spinning her around until she was laughing and dizzy. "We are having a baby," he said, setting her down carefully and cupping her face. "Thea, we are having a baby." "We are," she confirmed and felt tears on her cheeks, happy tears. "Are you pleased, pleased?" He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her mouth. "I am thrilled, terrified but thrilled." He became impossibly protective after that, trying to take over all the heavy work, but Thea refused to be coddled. She was pregnant, not fragile, and she kept working right up until the last month when her belly grew too large to mount a horse comfortably. Even then, she helped where she could, managing the accounts and planning for the future. They added a room to the house for the baby, Zachary working evenings to get it finished before winter. He built a cradle with his own hands, carving it from cottonwood and smoothing every surface until it was silky beneath her fingers. Their son was born in February of 1879, during a howling blizzard that trapped them in the house for 3 days. Thea labored through a long night and into the morning, with Zachary holding her hand and whispering encouragement, and Mary Patterson, who had arrived the week before to help, serving as midwife. When the baby finally came, wailing his displeasure at the cold world, Thea held him against her chest and felt her heart expand in ways she had not imagined possible. "He is perfect," Zachary breathed, touching the baby's tiny hand with one scarred finger. "He is absolutely perfect." They named him Thomas, after Thea's father, and he had her dark hair and Zachary's blue eyes. Watching her husband cradle their son, his big hands infinitely gentle, Thea felt the last pieces of her life fall into place. This was what mattered. Not wealth or status or living up to anyone's expectations. Just this: family, home, love built on mutual respect and hard work. As Thomas grew, the ranch prospered. They added more cattle, bought another section of land. Zachary hired 2 good ranch hands, young men who respected Thea's authority as much as his, and the extra help meant they could finally take occasional time to themselves. 2 years after Thomas came Sarah, a fierce little girl with her mother's determination and her father's laugh. And then, 3 years after that, another boy they named William, who was gentle and thoughtful and loved the horses more than anything. The house grew with the family, room by room, until it was no longer the small cabin Zachary had built alone but a real home, full of noise and life. The ranch became one of the most successful in the territory, known for quality cattle and fair dealing. But for Thea, The greatest success was the life she and Zachary had built together. On summer evenings, she would stand on the porch and watch her children play in the yard, the mountains purple in the distance and the sky painted with sunset. Zachary would come up behind her, his arms sliding around her waist, and they would stand together in comfortable silence. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked her once, years into their marriage. "Leaving Boston, coming out here to marry a stranger?" Thea turned in his arms, looking up at the face she knew as well as her own. He was graying at the temples now, lines deepening around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. But he was still the strongest man she knew, still her partner in every way that mattered. "Never," she said firmly. "This is exactly where I am meant to be, even on the hard days. Especially on the hard days, because we face them together." He kissed her then, soft and sweet, the kiss of two people who had built a life from nothing but determination and love. Their children grew strong and capable, learning to work the ranch from the time they could walk. Thomas became his father's shadow, learning cattle and horses with passionate dedication. Sarah proved to have her mother's head for business, managing the accounts by the time she was 12. And William found his calling in breeding horses, developing a line of working stock that became sought after across the territory. Years passed, seasons turning, the ranch expanding and thriving. Thea's hands remained scarred and calloused from work, and she never apologized for them. When Thomas married and brought his wife to the ranch, Thea welcomed the younger woman with open arms and taught her everything she had learned about partnership and strength. When Wyoming became a state in 1890, Zachary and Thea celebrated with their children and growing number of grandchildren, raising glasses to the future. They were in their 40s now, both weathered by years of hard work and Wyoming weather, but still strong, still partners. "We helped build this," Zachary said, looking around at the family gathered in their home. "Not just the ranch, but all of this, everything that matters." "We did," Thea agreed, taking his hand. Their calluses matched now, worn smooth in places where they had worked side by side for so many years. "And I would not change a single moment." On their 20th anniversary, their children surprised them with a new barn, bigger and better than the old one, built by all three working together. Zachary stood in the doorway with tears in his eyes, looking at what his children had created. "They learned from the best," Thea told him, squeezing his hand. "They learned from you," he replied. "You taught them that strength comes in many forms, that a woman can be both gentle and fierce. You taught them what real partnership looks like." As they grew older, they began to step back from the day-to-day running of the ranch, letting Thomas take over more of the management. But they never stopped working entirely. Thea still tended her garden, now expanded to feed the whole family, and Zachary still rode out to check the cattle, though he did not go as far as he once had. They spent more time together, riding out to their favorite spots, reminiscing about the early days when it had been just the two of them against the wilderness. They held hands like newlyweds and still kissed like they meant it. "You remember the first time I saw you?" Zachary asked one evening, sitting on the porch and watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. "Stepping off that stagecoach looking like you could wrestle a bear and win." "I remember thinking you were the biggest man I had ever seen," Thea replied, leaning against his shoulder, "and wondering if I had made a terrible mistake coming all this way. And now I know it was the best decision I ever made." She tilted her head up to kiss his jaw. "You saw me, really saw me when everyone else just saw someone who did not fit. You valued my strength instead of fearing it." "Your strength is what I fell in love with first," he admitted. "Well, that and your eyes, but mostly your strength." Their grandchildren grew up hearing stories of how their grandmother had come west alone, how she had worked alongside their grandfather to build the ranch from almost nothing. They learned that women could be strong and men could be gentle, that real love was built on respect and partnership. When Thea was 60, one of her granddaughters asked her what the secret was to a happy marriage. "Find someone who sees all of you and loves what they see," Thea replied. "Find someone who values your strength, who wants a partner, not a decoration. And then work at it every single day, because love is not just a feeling. It is a choice you make over and over again." The granddaughter had written it down, and Thea saw her repeat the words years later at her own wedding. Zachary's health began to fail when he was in his late 60s, his strong body finally showing the effects of decades of hard labor. But he faced it with the same straightforward acceptance he had brought to everything else in life. "I have had a good run," he told Thea, sitting in their favorite spot overlooking the valley. "More than I ever expected, and I got to spend it with you." "We are not done yet," she insisted, though she could see the weariness in his eyes. "Not yet," he agreed. "But when the time comes, I want you to know that you made my life everything it could have been. I was alone out here, just surviving until you came. You taught me what it meant to truly live." He lasted another 2 years, long enough to see Thomas's first grandson born, long enough to celebrate their 40th anniversary, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And when he finally slipped away peacefully in his sleep, Thea held his hand and whispered her love one more time. She grieved, but not with bitterness. How could she when they had been given so much? She had loved and been loved, had built a life of meaning, had raised children who carried their values into the next generation. Zachary had given her 40 years of partnership and passion, of respect and devotion. She stayed on the ranch, still working the garden, still helping where she could. Her children wanted her to rest, to let them care for her, but she refused. "I am built for this," she told them, echoing Zachary's words from so long ago. "This work, this life, it is who I am." She lived to be 78, still strong and clear-minded, still wearing the calluses that had first caught Zachary's attention. And when she finally joined him, her children buried her beside him on the hillside overlooking the ranch, where they could watch over what they had built together forever. The headstone was simple, carved by William, who had inherited his father's skill with his hands. Thea Hollister, 1854–1932. Beloved wife, mother, and partner, she was built for this on quiet evenings, when the wind whispered through the cottonwoods and the mountains turned purple with sunset. The family swore they could still feel them there, Zachary and Thea, watching over the ranch and the family they had created. Not as ghosts, but as the foundation everything else was built upon, their love story woven into the very soil. The ranch continued through the generations, each one adding their own chapter while honoring what had come before. And whenever someone asked about the history, the story they told first was about the mail-order bride who arrived with calluses harder than any ranch hand, and the cowboy who had taken one look at her strong hands and known he had found his partner for life. It was a love story, yes, but it was also a story about strength and respect, about building something that lasted, about two people who saw each other clearly and chose each other completely. It was about partnership in its truest form, two individuals becoming something greater together than they ever could have been apart. And in the end, that was Thea and Zachary's real legacy, not just the successful ranch or the thriving family, but the example they had set of what love could be when it was built on a foundation of mutual respect, honest work, and the recognition that strength comes in many forms and should always be valued, never feared. The cottonwoods still grew by the creek, golden every autumn. The mountains still stood watch over the valley, And the house that Zachary built with his own hands still stood strong, weathering storm after storm, just like the love that had created it. Inside, new generations learned the old stories about a woman who crossed a continent to marry a stranger and found her home, about a man who saw strength where others saw unwomanly hardness and recognized his perfect match. They learned that real love stories were not about weakness needing strength, but about two strong people choosing to be stronger together. They learned that calloused hands could be as beautiful as soft ones, that a woman who could wrestle a calf and mend fence could also be cherished and adored. They learned that the best partnerships were built on honesty and hard work, on seeing each other clearly and loving what you saw. And on summer evenings, when families gathered on that same porch where Zachary and Thea had stood so many times, they would look out over the land and remember. Remember that everything they had, everything they were, had started with two people who took a chance on each other and built a love that lasted beyond their own lifetimes, a love that became the bedrock of everything that followed. That was Thea and Zachary's true gift to the generations that came after them. Not just land or cattle or prosperity, but the knowledge that real love was possible, that partnerships built on respect could thrive, that strength in a woman was something to celebrate rather than suppress. They had lived their truth boldly, loved each other fiercely, and created something that endured long after they were gone. The mail-order bride with calloused hands and the cowboy who valued strength had found each other across the vast distance of a continent, had chosen each other against all odds, and had proved that sometimes the most unconventional beginnings led to the most extraordinary love stories. Their legacy lived on in every child who learned to value capability over appearance, in every marriage built on partnership rather than dependence, in every person who understood that being built for the hard work of life was something to take pride in. And somewhere, in the whisper of wind through cottonwood leaves and the endless stretch of Wyoming sky, their love story continued, eternal as the mountains, enduring as the land they had claimed together and made their own.